Welcome to the second video in our Boost Your Rehab series. Today we're going to talk about how to build a bigger cup. And this obviously continues on our cup analogy that we talked about in the first video. If you haven't watched it, make sure to give it a watch before continuing this one. So just a quick recap, we talked about the size of the cup representing our stress tolerance and the water getting poured into the cup representing our stress exposure. If that exposure exceeds our tolerance, our cup might overflow and we might get pain or even get injured. So, we talked about the strategy of building a bigger cup because having a bigger cup increases our odds of being able to do the things that we like, the things that we love, chase our physical goals and live our life in physical freedom. Sounds nice, but how are we actually going to achieve that bigger cup? So we talked about the cup size being influenced by things like age, nutrition, general health, training stress and sleep. And we also talked about the different influence we have on those factors. And today we're going to talk about training status. We're going to talk about how to influence your training status to increase your stress tolerance. And we're not going to just talk about that specific tissue that is hurting. So if your knee is hurting, we're not just going to train the knee. We also want to look at your general physical status, your general training status, and increase that. Because the stronger you are, the more conditioned you are, the more flexible you are, in general, will probably increase your stress tolerance. Having a fit body, having a high training status increases your stress tolerance. Now, obviously, we are also going to look at the specific tissue. If you hurt your knee, we're going to train the knee or the surrounding tissue. We're going to train the back. If you hurt your back, we're going to train the elbow. If you hurt your elbow, of course. But we also want to have a look at the surrounding area, the next joints and muscles that are in line in this specific chain. So how does that work and why do we do that? Because if, for example, your knee is hurting, then sometimes the issue is not that that knee can't tolerate that stress because the stress tolerance is low. The problem sometimes is that all the stress gets directed towards the knee because the surrounding tissue, the surrounding joints are not doing their job. So instead of spreading that stress over your hip muscles, your knee, your ankle, all that stress gets directed towards that knee. And obviously, if your knee has to handle all that stress, the chances of that cup overflowing becomes greater. So if your knee is hurting, we also want to train the hip and the ankle. If your elbow is hurting, we're also going to give specific attention to, for example, the shoulder joint. We want the full chain to work, to be strong, to be able to handle stress and carry that load so that that stress gets spread over the entire chain. And that makes the chances of that cup overflowing, that exposure exceeding that tolerance on one specific tissue lower. So that's our plan. But in order to do that, the funny thing is that if we want to increase our training status, we actually have to pour more water into the cup. We want decent stress exposure, but we have to be smart about it. And in order to understand that and how we're actually going to do that, we need some understanding on the adaptability of the body. So there are multiple ways of being able to handle stress. So something could be fragile, like a porcelain cup. If you apply stress to the system, it will probably break. Something could also be robust. If you apply stress on a stone, on a rock, it probably won't budge. Nothing will happen. So these things won't alter by applying stress to the system. Now our body actually works anti-fragile, just like this Greek mythological creature that you see here, an hydra, it was said in Greek mythology that if you would cut off one of its heads, 3 would grow back. So if you apply stress to the system, it grows back stronger. And that's actually also how our body works. And we can see that in simple things like, for example, calluses on our hands. If you work with your hands, you put stress on the system, you might get some damage, and your body reacts by repairing itself, not towards baseline, but preparing itself for future stress and becoming stronger. But we have to be smart about it, because if we're just mindlessly applying stress to the system, we might just get blisters. And that's not what we want. We want these nice calluses so that you are more resistant towards stress in the future and actually build a bigger cup. We need a higher stress tolerance. So how are we going to do that? We need to have a look at multiple factors to decide what the proper amount of stress is to apply to a system in order for it to adapt in an anti-fragile way. Become stronger and not fragile and just hurt yourself by applying stress. So we want to keep in mind some factors for recovery, and the most important one is time. So if I just work with my hands, I might have opened up some blisters, whatever, might did some damage to my skin. If I go back the next day while my blisters are still open, and if I'm going to work with my hands again, then obviously those blisters are just going to tear and get worse. If I go back and do it again the next day, it will just get worse and worse and worse. If I don't give the system time to recover, it does not have the time or ability to grow back stronger. Now, the amount of time and the amount of stress you can handle is also determined by your sleep, nutrition, and stress. So I can tell you now, I can tell how much you can handle. That depends on your specific status, on the size of your cup, like we already talked about. Some people need more time to recover, some people can handle more stress in a specific given time, and some people can handle a bit less or need more or less time to recover. If we have an idea about our factors for recovery, then we can push the right buttons, increase or decrease the right factors to actually decide the right amount of stress to put on the system in order for it to adapt in a positive way instead of a negative way. And this is where strength training becomes very important, because strength training is one of the only sports where we can really influence these factors. We can, for example, change the range of motion. We can squat deep, we can squat all the way down, but we can also do to 90 degrees, we can do squats to 45 degrees. Whatever your body can handle, that's what we're going to do. We could increase that weight, so we could apply weight to the system, but we can also decrease the weight. So we want to be smart about this and know what is the body able to recover from at this specific moment in time. We could go for high repetitions and we could go for low repetitions. So we have a lot of factors that we can change here. We could do it fast or we could do it slow. So we really want to decide on all these different factors, make specific smart choices, push the right buttons, and put the volume just where you can handle it, in order for the body to have a positive adaptation to stress and not a negative one. We want calluses, not blisters. Now, how we specifically are going to decide on that dose, I will tell you in the next video.